Good evening, Draftaholics, and welcome to Draft Punks. I'm Sam.
And I'm Adrian, and this is your pre-release and draft guide for Lost Caverns of Ixalan. It wouldn't be a return to Ixalan without Explore. When a creature explores, you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, you can put it into your hand. If it's not a land, you put a +1/+1 counter on your creature and can then either leave that card on top or put it into your graveyard.
Much like original Ixalan, Explore shows up briefly in all colours, but is primarily seen in green, and at a good rate too. Just check out Cenote Scout here. Explore is fantastic for ensuring you hit your early land drops, digging for key cards later, getting some above-rate bodies, and filling up your graveyard for Descend. More on that in a sec.
But there's a new twist on Explore this time. Map tokens. These are new artifact tokens that have one tap sacrifice, target creature you control explores. Most of the non-rares that create map tokens are blue, such as Waterwind Scout and Spyglass Siren. So blue-green is likely to be the home of an Explore-heavy deck.
If the past few years with artifact tokens have taught us anything, it's that there's always something to do with random artifacts lying around. You can sacrifice them to Duskrow's Reliquary or Fanatical Offering. You can use them to fuel your artifact synergies, such as on Adaptive Gem Guard, or just put some fancy pants on them.
Can we interest you in some craft work? Craft is a new ability on transforming double-faced cards that lets you combine your cards and/or tokens into something more exciting. To activate a craft ability, you need to do 3 things. Pay the mana in the craft cost, exile some materials that are specified in the craft cost, then exile the permanent with craft. Note that the materials you exile can come from your battlefield or your graveyard.
That's a bit to remember, so let's look at an example. Saheeli's Lattice is a regular artifact on the front that gives you a Tormenting Voice type effect when it enters. It then has craft with 1 or more dinosaurs for 4 and a red. This means that at sorcery speed, you can pay 4 and a red and exile any number of dinosaurs from your battlefield or your graveyard, then exile Saheeli's Lattice and return it transformed. The backside is then a mechanical dinosaur with power equal to the total power of the dinos that you exiled to craft it.
But be careful. The craft materials are very different across the set. Some cards like Saheeli's Lattice craft with multiple cards, but some craft with just 1. And there are cards that craft with artifacts, creatures, islands, caves, specific creature types, and sometimes just any other card. You can sacrifice tokens, including map tokens to pay for craft abilities, but be careful. They will cease to exist after they've been exiled, so won't count towards the backside, like the power on the backside of Saheeli's Lattice.
There's a suite of keywords in Lost Caverns of Ixalan all related to descending. Craft might be deceptively tricky, but Descent is deceptively simple. You're just watching for permanent cards entering or hanging out in your graveyard. Let's look at some examples.
Descended is just new terminology for a permanent card was put into a graveyard from anywhere. So that means your Deep Goblin Skulltaker or Child of the Volcano will trigger on end step if you discarded a permanent card, milled a permanent card, including off of Explore, or if a permanent card you control goes from the battlefield to the bin. However, one weird rules quirk. Since Descend only looks for permanent cards, it doesn't trigger off tokens, which aren't actually cards. So sacrificing your map tokens won't count as descending.
There is also Descend 4, which appears on abilities that are active only if you have 4 or more permanent cards in your graveyard. Same with Descend 8, Verb 8 permanent cards in the bin. This is also similar to Fathomless Descent, which counts the number of permanents in your graveyard and then scales the effect accordingly.
Hey, Modern and Commander players. You know how Cascade is widely regarded as a fair and balanced mechanic that is nice and fun for everyone and has never been used for nefarious purposes?
Well, good news! Here's Discover. It's basically Cascade, but slightly different. Let's check out Geological Appraiser, or I can't believe it's not Bloodbraid Elf. Appraiser has Discover 3, which means that you exile cards from the top of your library until you hit a non-land card with mana value 3 or less. You can then cast that card for free, or, unlike Cascade, you can put that card into your hand. So this makes Discover much better with counterspells, removal, and the other situational cards that you're likely to find in Limited.
Discover, unlike Cascade, is not tied to the mana value of the original spell. That means we can have variable Discover numbers, like on Hurl into History. discover 10 on a 7 mana card, and even cards that discover as an activated ability, including a whole cycle of common lands that can discover 4 for 5 mana tap and sack.
Blue-White is the home of craft in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, headlined by Master's Guide Mural, which crafts into Master's Manufactory. This colour pair looks like it will play out like a late-game control deck. There's a few strong control artifacts that can be crafted as the game moves on. Check out Spring-Loaded Saw Blades, a removal spell that can be crafted into a powerful late-game vehicle. Or if you like drawing cards, try Inverted Iceberg, a nice early-game cantrip that flips into a Colossal Dreadmaw.
You'll be wanting plenty of fodder to go with your craft cards, so keep an eye out for Brackish Blunder or Spyglass Siren to create some disposable fodder to craft with. But remember, you can craft from your graveyard too, which means that any of Blue's graveyard enablers are of interest here too. Perhaps Orazka Puzzle Door, Waterlogged Hulk, or fan favorite Charter Course.
And speaking of graveyards, welcome to my favourite archetype, Blue-Black Descend Control. Descend shows up in several archetypes, but it's in its most controlling form with Blue-Black. The deeper you can descend, the more your Song of Stupefaction looks like Doomblade, your Council of Echoes looks like a Manowar in a fat suit, and your Chupacabra Echo looks like it actually deserves that name.
Once again, you'll want to be on the lookout for ways to fill your graveyard, especially for Descend 4 and 8 cards. In addition to those we mentioned before, there are a number of self-mill cards in Blue-Black, like Deathcap Marionette and Song of Stupefaction to help turbo fill the bin. You also want to be careful with how many non-permanent cards you include in these decks, so look out for permanent-based control cards like Deadweight and Abyssal Gorestalker where possible.
The Black-Red archetype is Sacrifice. Wait, hang on. It's Sacrifice, right? What? What do you mean it's not? It's always Sacrifice. Yeah, whoa, okay. Anyway, the Black-Red archetype is Attrition Aggro. Grind your opponent's resources down with any of the 4 different 1-mana removal spells and efficient discard on cards like Deep Cavern Bat, Skullcap Snail, and Visage of the Dead.
While you strip your opponents of all options, you can pressure their life total with a red artifact aggro game plan via cards like Brazen Blade Master and Dowsing Device. Pour one out for any opponent facing your signpost uncommon Zoyowa Lava Tongue, who helps you play battlefield and hand resource denial at the same time as mercilessly eating their face.
We know you only came back to Ixalan for one reason. Dinosaurs. Well, hold on to your butts for this one. Check out Belligerent Yearling. What the hell? And you can pair that with Burning Sun's Cavalry and Scytheclaw Raptor to get a nasty amount of damage into play real quick.
And dinos aren't known for being gentle. Between Signpost Uncommon Itzkinth, Firstborn of Geshath, Huatley's Final Strike, and Triumphant Chomp, you'll also be eating your opponent's creatures with ease. And if you're more a fan of the Heckin' Chonkosaurus kind of dino, there's plenty of that too, with Cavern Stomper, Earthshaker Dreadmaw, and Nurturing Bristleback happy to turn your opponents into footprints.
The green-white archetype is cards that do things that green and white cards do. Yeah. Look, this archetype's a little less defined, but there's plenty of power here. Green has a whole range of powerful explore creatures and payoffs, white has craft and artifact synergies, and both colors just have a good set of options up and down the curve.
So you can probably theme your green-white deck in a few different directions depending on the payoffs you see. Glorifier of Suffering seems great for green-white artifacts, Thrashing Brontodon and Colossodactyl for green-white dinosaurs, and Malamet Warscribe for green-white go-wide.
White-black is a sacrifice deck, because apparently black-red couldn't be bothered this time. Headlined by the powerful unconditional sack outlet, Bartolome del Presidio. Bartolome is joined by Acolyte of Aquazots and Fanatical Offering for powerful sacrifice options, along with Vanguard of the Rose as the latest Adanto Vanguard variant.
The sacrifice fodder in this set is cheap and plentiful. We're particularly excited by Tithing Blade at common, as an edict effect that you can sacrifice for value, and Mephitic Draft as a new Ica Wellspring for those who don't understand the meaning of enough value. And that's before we get into Greedy Freebooter, Skullcap Snail, Bat tokens, Gnome tokens.
Oh hey opponent,
tokens.
Are you my landlord? There seems to be a lot of fungus that you can't remove. Black-green graveyard stuff is pretty well-trod territory at this point, but in a set with Descend, that's actually kind of exciting. We've already seen that black has some great options for sacrificing and self-milling, and hey, it's got discard outlets too in Bitter Triumph. And we know that green is loaded to the gills with Explore, like on River Herald Guide and Seeker of Sunlight. So, you know what that means.
Yeah, Descend is going to be easier to turn on than Olivia Voldaren. If you're in black-green, you might as well consider Descend 4 to always be active, so keep an eye out for Basking Capybara, Echo of Dusk, and Kawadi Scavenger. And if you manage to stick an Akawali the Seething Tower, your opponent is probably going to be turned into fungus food in short order.
Blue-green is the dedicated Explore deck, and this might be the most excited for blue-green that we've been in a long time. All of the Explore creatures look great, from Cenote Scout to River Herald Scout to Pathfinding Axejaw, and that's just the creatures. That's before we get to the equipment, instants, and sorceries that let any creature explore.
Nikanzil Current Conductor is the gold signpost for the Explorer archetype, offering you some extra value every time you explore either a land or a non-land. But she is not the only payoff for a dedicated Explore deck, with twists and turns giving you an extra scry on each of your explores to let you hit what you're looking for, before transforming into a land that can dig for more creatures.
Blue-red is an artifacts deck, and looks to have good options to be either aggressive or controlling. On the aggro end of things, we've got Goblin Tomb Raider, who reminds us a bit of Brothers War All-Star Goblin Blast Runner. We've also got Diamond Pickaxe, which just on its own looks like the strongest Goldvein pick variant that we've ever seen. And that's before you even think about strapping a Zoetic Glyph to it for a 4/3 indestructible beater.
A more controlling blue-red artifacts deck might look to take advantage of cheap defensive artifacts like Hermitic Nautilus, Lodestone Needle, or Idol of the Deep King to prolong the game and start crafting its cheap early plays into late-game finishes.
Red-white looks like it has an interesting theme this time, rather than just being fun police. There's a theme running through these colours of tapping artifacts and creatures you control for effects, headlined by Gold Uncommon Caparocty Sunborn, who can tap 2 things to discover 3. We see similar effects on Sunshot Militia to deal damage, and Adaptive Gem Guard to add +1/+1 counters.
The trick here is to never have to tap down a real permanent. All of those cheap artifacts with an ETB effect that can be crafted late game are perfect fodder for these tap effects, as are any random tokens you have floating around. And good news, because red-white has plenty of cards that can spit out treasure tokens, bat tokens, gnome tokens, and more.
Finally, let's take a look at the fixing of the set to see if there are easy options for splashing in your pre-release seal pool or for multicolour nonsense in draft. While there's no dual land cycle in Lost Caverns of Ixalan, there are a number of lands that can help you fix your mana, most of which have the beneficial Cave subtype. These include Promising Vein, Pit of Offerings, Captivating Cave, and Forgotten Monument.
We've also got a couple of decent artifact fixing options, including Compass Gnome, Scampering Surveyor, and Sunbird Standard. These are on top of the many cards in the set that create treasures, primarily in red. Together, this all indicates that we should have plenty of options for fixing outside green, although you may need to dedicate some spell slots to fix your mana.
Lost Caverns of Ixalan Limited looks deep, intricate, and multifaceted. It has good beatdown options for those who like Dino Stompy, artifact derpy control options for those of us who like taking game actions rather than actually winning the game, and fun, synergistic build-arounds for those who want to keep drafting well into the format.
If you want an early glimpse into Lost Caverns of Ixalan Limited after your pre-release, make sure you subscribe to the Draft Bunks, because we will have our drafts from early access in your feeds in the coming days. And as always, to join the crazy little community that we have over here, all you have to do is remember what to call a werewolf on YouTube.
It's a like and subscribe.
And that's before we get into Greedy Freebooter, Skullcap Snail, Bat tokens, Gnome tokens, Fungus tokens, Treasure tokens, Your Mum tokens, the tokens that are on the end of the ice cream when you finish the ice cream, the tokens that you see on the bottom of the cereal box when you finished all of the cereal, Sam tokens, Adrian tokens, Lyndon tokens, Eat a Dict tokens,